All right, guys, welcome back to another Capstone Chat. Today we have Austin Sussman with us, and he was a 2017 graduate from the digital filmmaking concentration. But he has since gone on to be a webinar specialist at Ciena, and he's going to explain to us what that means and more, I'm hoping. Welcome, Austin.
Monica, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. And like Monica said, I graduated in 2017, and it seems like just yesterday that I was in the capstone class wondering what was next. I had some kind of vague ideas about where I thought I was going to be headed. In a lot of ways, those ideas turned out to be kind of wrong. But I've been very happy with how my career journey has gone since my time at Shepherd. I think that the fact that some of my ideas about where I thought my career was headed when I graduated really changing, that's nothing new to me, because at almost every point in my life, I've had some idea of what was next. And without fail, a year later, I was in a completely different place than where I thought I was going a year before. It's never, oh man, I really thought by now I would be X. It's, oh man, I had no idea that this was even possible. I'm so excited that my life took this turn. Some of the classes I took at Shepherd, it doesn't exactly line up with what I'm doing today, but without them, I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am today. So everything in my career path, for the most part, I feel like I got something out of. It just wasn't always what I thought I was going to get out of it at the time. So to get a little bit more specific, in high school, I really wanted to be a filmmaker. I did a lot of independent short films. I did one really, really, really bad independent feature that somehow won an award. But so I did the film thing from high school on. And I also did a lot of freelance video work. I would do theatrical recordings, promos for different events in the Charleston area, political ads, music videos, website videos. So I've done a lot of video work, and I still do a little bit of that on the side, not as much now as I used to, but I still have all the gear and try to keep those skills sharp. But so that's how I ended up at Shepherd. At the time, the digital filmmaking program at Shepherd, I think, was the only film program in the state. So in my sophomore year, there was an independent film festival called the Cut to the Chase Film Festival that came to Shepherdstown. And they put a post up on, I think it was the COM Facebook group, saying they were looking for a social media intern. And I kind of thought, great, I can earn a little bit of money, network with filmmakers. And I had done some social media work to promote my independent shorts and other film projects I did. I definitely didn't consider myself an expert in it, and everything I knew was self-taught, but I thought, I can apply for this internship and it could be an opportunity to meet other filmmakers. I got that internship, really enjoyed working with those folks. And the venue that the film festival was held at, which is the Opera House on German Street at the time, was owned by a filmmaker, someone who had done some work for I think Discovery and CNN and some other like cable documentary type work. And he was looking for someone to run social media for the Opera House. And he saw what I did for the film festival, interviewed me, we connected. And so I was the social media manager for the Opera House. Again, almost completely self-taught. One of my biggest regrets from my time at Shepherd is that I never took any of the like PR and social media classes. Because I think that would have really come in handy later on in my life. But all of that stuff, I found ways to teach myself. But anyway, so I was the social media manager for the Opera House, which basically meant that I was a bartender that also got 5 hours a week to work from home, doing social media, really basic stuff, making posts about the shows that were coming, looking at like if there was a band coming, looking through their press kit and figuring out what we should post on our Facebook page. If they didn't have a press kit, working in Canva to make some materials to promote the show. And I didn't get into the ad side at that point, but I would give the owner information about like, oh, these posts are doing well, you should boost this with, I mean, I think it was like $20 a week that he would spend boosting stuff. And again, I didn't take the job because I thought I want to do social media for the rest of my life. I wanted to network with this guy who was a filmmaker, and thought maybe that would lead to some film opportunities down the line. What I instead found was that I really enjoyed doing the social media stuff, and I found other kind of freelance gigs doing social media and digital advertising, starting when I was in college and continuing I'd say long, I've only been out of college 5 years now, but continuing past then. And so one of those opportunities was doing some freelance work for an agency called 84 Agency. They are a creative agency in Charleston that works with nonprofits, mostly based in West Virginia, but they also have some national clients. And I think we had a few international clients at the time that I worked with them as well. So that was mainly social media work initially, and video editing. So I did some work for them. I did some work, like social media work, for other small businesses. And again, I'd have the occasional freelance video gig, through graduation and after I graduated. Immediately after graduation, I did the Disney college program for a semester. I know a lot of people who, to them, that was a big part of their career journey, and really benefited from that. For me, it was a good way to kind of spin my wheels while I figured out what I wanted to do next. I applied for some other opportunities within Disney, was not called to interview for any of those. But, I look back on it like this: a lot of people have to work kind of a survival job for the first few months after they get out of school. Disney World is not a bad place to do that. I got free access to the parks. So it was a good time. When I finished my program there, I moved up to New York, where my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was finishing school. Continued my freelance social media work. I did a couple different survival jobs in New York. I was a janitor at Uber. That was definitely, like, professionally kind of the low point in my career, was walking in and finding vomit that people had decided to cover up rather than clean the night before. So that if we talk about low points, that's definitely one of them. But did that for a while, worked as a camera salesman at Best Buy for a while, and all the while applying for and interviewing for stuff in New York. And I constantly felt like the next big thing is right around the corner. And then when my wife graduated, she got a really cool opportunity back in Charleston, West Virginia, where I'm from. And so I thought, all right, well, all of my freelance work is based out of Charleston, so I have plenty of connections there. I started sending emails to anyone I could think of, who I had either worked for in the past or had known in that community, just saying, hey, I'm coming back to Charleston. I'm looking for work. Here's my portfolio of video and social media work. If you have opportunities in that field, great. Also, I also just need to pay the bills. So if you're looking for someone who's a hard worker, who can answer the phones, who can do clerical work, like I need to find a job, basically. And one of those emails was to a local businessman who, his main day job was in financial services, something I knew absolutely nothing about, but he was in a band. And I had done some music video work for them a few years back, and I knew he was really well connected in the community. So again, I said, hey, I'm moving back to Charleston. I know you had complimented my work ethic when we were doing this video work. If you hear anything about any job opportunities, either in the communications field or just like something that kind of anyone who has a good work ethic can do, let me know. I'd be happy to apply. Again, I didn't think he'd have a job for me, but I thought he might know someone who might, or maybe even would just be a good person to list as a reference. He turned out was in the process of starting a pretty big political communications effort with a couple different organizations in West Virginia. This was something that I knew nothing about when I sent that initial email. It was just a really lucky coincidence. And it was something that they didn't have enough money to pay like someone who was already in that field and was well established, but I had the skills that they needed that could be pivoted into that political world. So I did, website work, CRM work. I did some copywriting, some video work, some graphics, some social media. And I taught myself the Facebook ads platform for that role as well. And between that work, the work I was still doing for 84 Agency, and a few other kind of one-off freelance video jobs, I had enough work to quit my day job and move back to Charleston and work full-time as a freelancer doing different types of video and digital communications work. So at that point, when I moved back to Charleston, I'd been doing this freelance thing for a few months. I thought, hey, maybe my future is I'm going to run a communications firm, start my own business. Maybe someday I'll have an office and a few employees. And so that was kind of my goal for a while. And then after about a year of doing that, I started to realize that like the type of work that I was getting in wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. There was 1 month where I had to do 3 or 4 different attack ads that it wasn't that I disagreed with the point that they were trying to make. And I recognized that if the argument can be made that if you want to make change in the world, sometimes you have to use tactics like that, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I was really enjoying the work that I was doing with 84 Agency in the nonprofit space. And I also realized that 26 was coming really fast and health insurance is a good thing. So I went to the folks at 84 Agency and I said, hey, I really enjoyed the work I've done with you all. I could tell that their work was increasing. They had just hired their first full-time employee other than their 2 founders. And I said, I don't know if you all are looking to hire more people as employees, but if you were interested in someone doing digital full-time, please let me know. I'd be happy to apply. I did end up getting hired by 84 Agency, and some of my freelance projects I brought over with me to the agency. Some I had to cut loose, and still some that didn't really fit within the scope of what 84 Agency did, particularly some of the more creative things that I was doing. I continued to do freelance outside of the agency. So I worked at 84 for about 2.5, 3 years full-time. And up until the pandemic started, it was mostly social media and digital communications work, some video, some editing. And then when the pandemic hit, we had a lot of clients who had budgeted for in-person events. They had budgeted for food, they had budgeted for event space. And when the pandemic hit, they had to cancel those events, but the meetings that they were planning, they still wanted to have those conversations, still wanted to share that information. And they didn't really know how to do that in a virtual way that would be meaningful. And so they reached out to us saying like, we know you all have worked remotely with clients before. We know you all have a video background and a storytelling background and the digital background. Can we brainstorm ways to bring these different events from in-person to online? And so along with a couple other members of the 84 Agency team, we really built a whole new side to that business, doing virtual conferences and events. And that, I would say that for a while, that was probably, I was spending half my time doing the social media stuff and half of it running these virtual events. At the same time, when the pandemic started, I started an independent project called Quick Call Y'all, which is a Facebook Live talk show where I talk to artists and creators and small business owners over Zoom about their work. We would have musicians come in and play live sets over Zoom. We did that for about 2 years. The second season, we actually got a grant from a local arts connector where their whole thing is like finding businesses that want to hire creatives and artists and connecting them with artists in the Charleston community. So they funded our show to pay the musicians to come on the show. And we worked with a graphic designer and a songwriter through them to be able to pay local people to make a new logo and a theme song for us. So that really is how I got into this world between the stuff at 84 and the talk show, how I got into that world of like virtual event production. Late 2021 or late spring 2021, Joe Joe Mahaney, who is also a Shepherd grad and works at Ciena, posted a job posting from Ciena in the Shepherd Communications Facebook group. And it was a remote role at Ciena, which is they're a publicly traded company. We do network system services and software. So it's, it's a much larger company than anything that I ever thought I would have an opportunity to work for in Charleston. Not because of my, my abilities, but because I really love the Charleston area. I don't particularly want to leave the area. And in the marketing and communication space, there are small business opportunities, there are agency opportunities. You can kind of run your own business if you want to do that. And there's some government roles in communications, but that's really was kind of the limiting factor in the Charleston area up until the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden remote opportunities became more of a thing. And so I applied for a role at Ciena that Joe had shared. I didn't end up getting that role. It went to another Shepherd Com grad, actually. When I found out who actually got that role, I was like, oh yeah, of course. They absolutely are better for that than I was. But a few months later, I got a call from Ciena. Somehow my resume had gotten from Joe's team to another team that was hiring someone to run their webinar program. And so I was asked to apply for that, which was, it was the first time I'd ever been directly asked to apply for a role. So that felt good. And so for the past 6 months or so, I have been working at Ciena as their webinar specialist, where I work with different stakeholders in the marketing program or the marketing organization to plan, promote, and produce webinars for our customers and potential customers about the products and services, as well as just kind of the general area of the networking space that we operate in. So that's kind of the overview of my career path. I know it has a lot of, it's not a conventional journey by any means. So I really want to sum it up in just a couple of points. The first is to be open to change and opportunities, because if I judge myself based on where I thought I would have been at any point, I would be off the map. But I took opportunities that were different from what I thought I wanted to be doing, and they've put me in really cool places. And a lot of times they've put me in places that I didn't even know existed a few months prior or didn't exist a few months prior. The second is don't be afraid to ask for an opportunity or ask for advice. Everyone is human, and it's always worth, just an email. If there's a question you want to ask someone or someone you look up to that you want to introduce yourself to them, the worst thing that happens is they don't respond, but most people are excited to hear that someone looks up to them and admires their work. And, I think most people enjoy talking about their work with someone who thinks their work is cool. So don't be afraid to send those emails. And the last point, and this is one that is really important to me, is know your value. Obviously, like if you have an artistic idea and you want to go out and create that thing, go out and create that thing and worry about how you're going to pay for it later. Obviously you want to get your name out there. You want to build your portfolio. If there's a cause in your community that you're passionate about and you want to donate your time and services to that, I commend you for doing that. For example, in my case, there's a local theater organization that, really made me who I am today. And I've done a lot of video work for them. I've never, other than a couple of situations where they had grants, and so they weren't the ones paying for the productions, I've never charged them a cent because, it's a cause I really believe in. But I also, early in my career, did a lot of projects for exposure, or people saying like, yeah, we'll do this. And if it's really great, then we'll be able to pay you for the next one. What I found is that most of the time, the people who will value you enough to pay for your work, they're going to pay you from the beginning. As I mentioned, the connection that led to the large political project that really put me on the path to digital communications that I'm on today. When I had done the music video work for him a few years earlier, he'd paid me. It wasn't much. I was a college kid who was still kind of learning his craft, but he saw that I was providing a service and that service had value. And he paid me something for that work. Obviously, you can't expect to be paid, what someone who has well established and really knows their stuff when you're just starting out. But if you're doing a service that someone's going to profit off of or get value out of, they should value you enough to give you something of value in return. So definitely like think about anytime you're asked to do something, think about the value that you're providing to them and what you're going to get out of that. So I think I have rambled on enough. We see we've got some questions here. Monica, should I just start calling out names or? Okay. I'm just going to go in the order on my screen. I see Ricky Nathan.
Yeah, so I had a question. Between doing work for like ads and music videos and social media work, do you have like a favorite type of video that you've worked on? Or I guess a specific type video that you've done?
Yeah. So I'm gonna give two examples. One of which was the feature film that I did my senior year of high school. It was a comedy, and I will admit there are things in it that I'm really not proud of, but just like it's a capstone of like that summer after my senior year and the jokes that I would tell with my friends. So like that from a sentimental place is really cool. The second piece that like I would say is like if someone asked me for a sample of my video work, that I would show it would have been December, or no, I guess we started working on it in October. October of 2020, the theater group that I referenced earlier reached out to me. They have a rock opera that they do every year at Christmas time. It's a rock opera of the story of Jesus's birth. And I'd been in it a couple of times. I'd seen it several times, and they weren't going to be able to do it because no one was doing live theater in October of 2020. But they had figured out a way to rewrite it to do it with just a piano and 6 actors. And they staged it as though it was a full production. And they hired me to, I hired 2 other people to run cameras with me. We rented like the right cameras for that space and really produced it as a full length theatrical recording. Not, when I'd done theatrical recordings in the past, they'd been more like an archive of the show so that the people who were in it could go back and watch it. But they were not great quality just because the budgets that we were limited to were not great. And also recording when you've got a live audience, it's never going to be as great because it's staged for that live audience. It's not staged for the camera. So being able to take that theatrical piece that was so important to me, work with the director so that it was staged for the cameras, film it on the right equipment, and then like actually take the time to go through and edit it as a piece meant for video, not a video recording of a staged play. That one came out. I was really happy. For anyone who's never shot in a theater before, the lighting, what looks really cool on stage, a lot of times looks really bad on video. And so being able to like capture that theatrical feeling on video was really, really cool.
All right. Thank you.
Next, I see Luke.
Hey, he actually stole my question, but I've got another one.
Okay.
Why did you switch from like being more of a videographer, filmmaker to more like a multimedia kind of switch, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, no, it is a couple of things. Part of it is that I am someone who really values stability. And so, especially in this area, there aren't a lot of jobs that you can find where you've got a salary and benefits in that video space. It's a lot of freelance work. It's a lot of kind of feast or famine. And I value that stability in my home life as much as I value, the type of work that I do. I also, though, like when going back to that feature that I did in high school, we ran a Kickstarter campaign for it to raise the funds for it. And I found that I actually enjoyed the process of going out and promoting that campaign. And then again, when the when we premiered that film, because we rented out a theater in my hometown to screen it, which, like, looking back, it sounds silly, like high school kids renting out a theater to show this goofy movie that they made, but we did it, and we had 200 people show up because I got out there and really, worked hard to make sure that anyone who knew us knew we were doing this premiere. And so I really enjoyed it. And so it's partially, I think, was a financial decision. But it also it was a skill that I learned in the process of promoting the video work that I grew to enjoy almost as much as the video work. And, in my current role, like the webinar, my job is like partially planning and promoting the webinars, but I also, when it comes to the day of the webinar, am in that producer role. And I really do enjoy that, like 1 hour that we're actually running the webinar. It's almost like a TV production. Obviously, the content is not always as exciting as what I might be producing in a video or a film space. But just being in that like live event space is really exciting to me. Next, I see Grace.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Grace?
Good. I'm good. I'm glad to be able to hear you talk about your passions and everything. It's really cool. My question was, you mentioned doing like a series of Facebook Lives where you interviewed like different artists and musicians and people. I was going to ask which your favorite interview was.
Oh man, yeah. So we did. It's hard to pick a favorite because that project just evolved so much over the course of doing it. I guess interviewing the head of the public art department for Charleston was really cool. Hearing about the efforts that they're taking to bring more like public art into our city. Yeah, I mean, I got to meet so many cool people, some of which were friends of mine that I knew they had cool things going on, and I got to like learn more. But also like there were some that I just like discovered Facebook would suggest like, hey, this is a person that like a page you should like, and I'd look at it and they'd be local and they'd be doing cool art stuff. Like we had one person on the show that did like bead workshops. So she had beads that she had sourced from different arts and cultures all over the world. And she would have these workshops where she would teach everyone the significance of the beads, and then they would use them to make different types of jewelry. So yeah, just getting to really discover the different types of artists that were in my community. I know that's not really like a favorite per se, but that's what I really enjoyed about that project.
Yeah, that's super cool. I feel like on the last thing you would think of is like bead art, but like that's so cool that like different people got to showcase their different passions and stuff. That's really awesome.
All right, next I see Robert Engel. Robert, it looks like you're muted. Yeah, Robert, I'm still not hearing you. If you want to type your question in the chat, I'll get to you next. But let's go to Michelle.
Hi, my question is, when you did the Disney college internship program, how many connections did you like meet out of it, and was it like worth it to do?
So from a career perspective, honestly, not really. From a like enjoyable experience in my life, yes, 100%. Professional connections, I can really only think of one. And he was a guest that has been on my talk show several times. He's a musician named Ronnie Gross Jr., he a couple of months ago actually was able to quit his day job and is now fully supporting himself through his music. I highly recommend he's on Spotify, Ronnie Gross Jr. He has an album out that is terrific. I've made like, from a personal standpoint, I made several friends that, we're still friends on Facebook. And if I'm in their area, I would absolutely, connect with them. but from a professional standpoint, I personally didn't get a ton out of it. Now, that's not to say that no one does. I have friends that, if you're really into the theme park space, and you want to work your way up through those ranks. I have friends that are now managers of lands at Disney, which is I'm very happy for them. And I do have one friend that is actually she is working for Disney Studios out in California. She's moved around to a couple of different roles. She had one, like she was on the social media team for the parks for a while. And then she was in a department, I think it's called the legacy department, where they she is the connection between the theme parks people and the film studio people to make sure that what the parks people are doing is true to the IP from the films. And she was a PA on Frozen 2. So she's moved around a lot within the Disney organization. She's actually someone I knew before I moved down to Florida. She's a few years older than me. So it's not to say that some people don't, have that as a slingshot to bigger things with Disney, but it didn't work out that way for me. Let's see, Robert. I have Robert's question. He mentioned that I did some film projects in high school and was wondering what did I do for my capstone and what was my process of it. So my capstone at Shepherd was a project called Dr. J and Mr. H. And I'm going to say that it dealt with subject matter that I have learned a lot more about in the years since. And looking back on it, I didn't handle it sensitively enough. And, so it's not a project that I share very frequently now, just because I realized that there are some things I got wrong and it could potentially be harmful. But it was using the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of as a metaphor for the opioid crisis. And it was a short film. And, it's again, like the project I mentioned from high school, I'm proud of it in that, from where I was at that point in my career, I did a lot of cool things and worked with a lot of really cool people. But I also have learned a lot more about substance use disorder in the time since then. We did a lot of work with recovery organizations at my role at 84 Agency. And so it's not something that I would publicly promote now. But, as a capstone project at the time, that was what I did. Next is Jacob. Jacob, I am not getting any audio from you.
How about now?
Yes.
All right. In your working experience, did you prefer freelance or working with a company?
Working with a company. Yeah, I know some people really or really want to run a company. What I found was that I was spending as much time chasing down new clients and dealing with tax law and kind of the business of running a business when I really just wanted to do the media work, make the videos. And so in my case, I really enjoy working for a company, being able to take vacation time and know that there's someone else there that can answer the phone if someone's, in my current role, I kind of have to plan to make sure that things are set up before I go. But in my old job, and this is something that happened both at 84 Agency and when I was a freelancer. In my old job, or as a freelancer, someone's website broke when I was on vacation. And so they had my personal cell phone number. They called me directly and I had to find a computer and fix their website. When I worked for 84 Agency, someone's website broke. They called the project manager and they found another member of our team to fix it because I was on vacation. And again, that's, talking about what you value the most. If you really value that independence, I guess there's different types of independence, because there's independence from having to be on the clock 24/7, but then there's also independence from being part of a company. But for me, I really enjoy kind of the boundaries that you're able to set when you're an employee compared to when you run your own business. Next, we have Grace Kearns.
Hi. So my question is, how do you go about making the choice to change your career path? Because you've been through quite a few changes. I just wanted to know, how you went about making those changes or choices?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first is just being open to any opportunity. So when an opportunity comes along, even if it's something that can radically change your path, looking at it and going, is this something I want to do? That's the first question. Is this something I can do? And then what would this mean? How would this change my life? For example, when I was in that freelance, when I was freelancing full time, a couple months before the 84 agency full-time opportunity came along, there was a political campaign that was looking for a digital communications director. It was kind of a scrappy upstart campaign. So they didn't have a ton of money. So I think I would have had at least a shot at being considered for that role. I don't want to say I definitely would have gotten the job, but I think it was something that I could have realistically applied for. And I was starting to think that like maybe freelancing full-time wasn't for me. And I seriously considered that. And it was one, I knew I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with the political space. And so I didn't want to go further into that space. I knew that, when you're working on a political campaign, it is full on intensity until the election, and then you can kind of take a breath, but then you've got to find a new job, because unless your candidate, if you're really good and your candidate wins and it's like a governor level role, maybe they have room for some communication staff. But like if you're working on a House of Delegates campaign, the campaign's over, they're in the House of Delegates, and you got to find a new job. And so like that was a situation where I had an opportunity that would have been a fundamental change to my career. And I didn't pursue it. Next, I see William.
So you talked about your public relations standpoint. What I would say during your time, probably as your career, what do you recommend being the most important thing that you've learned as you've gone gone into it? Yeah.
So by public relations, do you mean specifically like media outreach,
Yes.
Yeah. So with PR, and I haven't done a ton of PR work, but I've done some. The first is like build your most basic list of all the outlets that you want to reach. And in Charleston, it's great because we have, I think, 4 TV stations, a pretty good newspaper, a couple of magazines, a couple of blogs. It's in every area, it's different, but figure out what that list is, and just start trying to find the newsroom or the city editor, and just keep calling numbers until you get the right number. So you might call and get the ad department and say, I'm trying to reach the newsroom. Eventually you're going to get to the newsroom. So step one is like making sure you're calling as many people as possible to build that initial list. And then when you finally do start getting in touch with the actual reporters, make sure you get their business cards, save a list of all the reporters you've worked with, really kind of build those relationships, because the reporters are also, they've got pages to fill or stories on the website to fill. And so if you are providing something valuable to them as much as they are providing something valuable to you. So if you can build that relationship to where they see you as a partner, kind of having that, the more you can build that list, save those relationships. I know it's hard, especially right now because people are constantly moving between jobs. But having that list of all the newsrooms in your area, and then following up, I guess, would be the other one. So at 84 Agency, whenever we would send out a press release, we would send it to everyone on our list. Like if it was for an event, we would do it maybe a week before the event, send it to everyone on our list by email, and then immediately call the newsroom and say, hey, this is Austin from 84 Agency. Or, speak on behalf of the client. If they hear you're from an agency, they sometimes are like, oh, this guy's just, it feels more personal if you say, hey, this is Austin calling from XYZ organization. We've got this event. We just want to make sure you knew about it. We sent you an email. Did you get it? Because they get a lot of spam. And so those follow-up calls can be really good for them to realize like, oh, this is a real local organization. One example I have on that. So then this was kind of a more political issue, and I won't say what the issue was or what side of it I was on, but it was a political issue, and it was kind of a hot button issue nationally, but it was also very applicable to West Virginia. And so we were working with a grassroots local group to hold a press conference on that event or on that issue. We sent out a press release. When I called the newsroom, the same day, a national group was spamming every newsroom in America with a press release on that issue on the other side of the issue. So they saw our press release and thought we were this national spam thing. But because I called, they said, oh no, you guys are actually local. And they did send a camera to cover our event. So really, like, just be, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Everyone's a real person. And if you treat them like a real person and build that relationship, it's amazing how far you can get. All right, Monica, you had a question?
Sure, I do. Question for you. Actually, there's two questions. You mentioned that, you kind of taught yourself some of the tools for social media. How do you approach learning new things? Are you constantly kind of trying to brush up on all the new technology that's coming down for social media, which is a lot? And then secondly, the follow-up is, where do you think you'll be in 10 years?
Those are both really good questions. So as far as like how I keep myself up to date, I am a constant participant in social media. I've scaled it back a little bit now that it's not as big a part of my job. So part of it is, tracking what I see. And if there's something really cool going, wow, how'd they do that? And, looking at other posts that they've done, watching the opposition, in the political world opposition, in the commercial world competition, watching what other people in the same space are doing. But one example, and I love to tell this story, and I think a Shepherd audience will be very receptive to this story. Is everybody knows about Sheets, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I love Sheets. Like, I spend more money at Sheets than I care to admit. A couple of years ago, Sheets, I got tagged by Sheets saying like, hey, you've liked this post and you've won a free cup of coffee. Send us your mailing address so we can send you a voucher. And I thought, cool, I won this cup of coffee. And they mailed me a cup of coffee, or a voucher for a cup of coffee in the mail. Didn't really think anything of it. Enjoyed the free coffee. Weeks, maybe even months later, I get home and there's a package on my door, and I'm like, I don't think I ordered anything. I opened it up, and Sheets has sent me this wooden box. And I opened the box, and I had tweeted something about Sheets Boom Boom Sauce like months ago, and they had printed out the tweet and put that on top of the box and said like, yeah, we agree, it is great. And then there was a bottle of the sauce and like a Sheets t-shirt. And so if you think like all the work that went into, and I'm assuming this is how they did it. So they searched a list of people who had tweeted about this particular product. They had waited for those people to engage some other way so that they could message them. They had then said, we're going to send you this small prize. And then they had waited a couple of months and then sent the real prize. And then, if you look on Twitter, the week that those boxes went out, it was blowing up, people talking about it. And I'm sure I don't know how much money they made off of it. But like, that was a really, really in-depth thing. And I can't say like, yeah. And so we were able to take that and do X with it at my job, but it really like made me think about like, how can we be more personal with social media engagements? So that's just an example of like something cool that I've seen someone do that I have flagged. There are some podcasts, again, I don't spend as much time looking at that now because my job doesn't really, there's a separate social team at Ciena that really handles the social media promotion for webinars, and I just kind of keep them in the loop about what's coming up. But there's a Social Media Examiner podcast. They're great. And then just learning like the big political project there was also a consultant from DC that we had brought in, not really to like actually do the work, but to consult with us on strategy. And so learning as much as you possibly can from those people. And I'm, he's someone that I'm still in touch with to this day. And he's kind of a mentor of mine, even though we're not currently working on any projects together, because I was so receptive to what he had to teach us on that project. He brought me into a couple of his other projects. And I would be comfortable if there was a project he wasn't involved with and I had like a quick strategy question, calling him and saying like, hey, how would you handle this situation? So really it's, seeking out information. And then when you get in a room with an expert, without being rude, like get as much of their time as you can. So yeah, that's some of the self-taught questions, or, how I teach myself these kinds of things. As far as where I see myself in 10 years, it's hard because where I am today is so dramatically different than where I thought I'd be today a year ago. I never would have imagined that I'd be running a program for a publicly traded company. And so, I kind of had some idea around like, well, maybe I'll stay with 84 Agency for a few more years, and then maybe I'll go back to running my own company, or maybe I'll, I had really thought like, again, long-term, I didn't have any immediate plans to leave 84 Agency until the opportunity with Ciena came along. But, one of the things that I had considered was like, rather than working at the agency level, like finding a large nonprofit to apply as a communications director at. That seemed like the next logical step at the time. Now, I think there's so many different avenues of the marketing department at Ciena. I really enjoy, I've only been there 6 months, but for the time, from what I've seen so far, I really enjoy working there. And so it may be that I, over the next couple of years, work my way up through the marketing department into working the webinars or under the events team. So it may be that I grow into a role that handles other types of events. I may move into a different part of the marketing space at Ciena. There's the future has really changed from where I was 6 months ago. And so it's like I've just moved the camera and I'm still trying to get the lens in focus.
Great, thanks.
Looks like Michelle has a question.
Yeah. So do you have any like tips or tricks to improve your like filming style, or just keep going with it to make it look better?
So three things immediately come to mind. One, and these are probably all things that if you all have taken any of Jason and Kevin's classes, these probably you probably like, yeah, of course. But really think about lighting. Even, like in my role as a webinar specialist, when I got this role and realized I was going to be on camera a lot more, because I kind of MC our webinars, I flipped my home office around so that I was facing a window. And so I have natural light, assuming the weather's good. And so thinking about like how you can take advantage of light. And, if you can do artificial light, great. If not, think about where the natural light sources are. The second is simple with editing. A lot of times is better. I think we have a lot of really cool tools at our disposal, and if you use them well, it's great. But I think sometimes folks ask whether they can before they ask whether they should. And so in your post-production, like make sure that any kind of effects you use, transitions, that kind of stuff, like make sure it really fits. And the third would be to think about sound. Like moving from, even if you can't afford a really nice microphone, like sometimes you can put an iPhone in a strategic spot in the room and record it as a voice memo, and it's going to sound better than what's built into the camera. So thinking about that. And I got another question from Robert. TV, what skills beside videography? photography would be beneficial for working in television. I haven't really done any like formal TV work. I've done a little bit of like work that is like kind of studio based. Like I did some work with a minor league baseball team, like running their video board. But as far as like actually working in TV, I don't really have any experience there. But you know, just general like project management skills, I would those are something that have followed me in every role I have. And again, you know, not being afraid to reach out to people that you think a conversation with could be beneficial to your career.
Okay, guys, any last minute questions? Anything burning out there? Well, looks like we've gotten a really good amount to think about. Thank you so much, Austin, and good luck in your future endeavors. And you know, who the heck knows where we'll see you next, right?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for your time today. If you have any, you know, follow-up questions you think of later, feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm in the COM Facebook group. But yeah, thank you so much. These were great questions. And Monica, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Always.